supervisor of District 5. Even though I myself am a District 6 resident, I was impressed with Ross Mirkarimi. He was a two-term supervisor of District 5. In fact, I was so impressed that I volunteered to work on his campaign when he ran for sheriff. Now, Ross is actually, you might wonder, why would a supervisor run for sheriff? Ross is actually a graduate of a police academy. He's worked as an investigator for the district attorney's office. He actually does have a law enforcement background. But he went into his desire to serve as, kind of help the city out as a supervisor. I guess he took a turn that way for 2 terms. As you know, there's been a whole bunch of history since then, but Ross is now our sheriff for good, and I'm really glad. I mean, I'm glad it worked out. Thank you. The sheriff, a lot of people don't really know what really does the sheriff do. Is it really just the keeper of the jails, or what do they do? And I thought this would be a good opportunity for public education to really inform you about some of the really progressive work our sheriff does, starting with his predecessor, Michael Hennessy, but now even he's taking it further. He's doing progressive things, in fact, things that are inspiring the rest of the nation. In many ways, as you know, San Francisco leads the nation in progressive politics and programs, and I think one of the departments of our city that is progressive is our sheriff's department, and I think you'll see why when you hear Ross speak and you find out what's really going on. So with that, let's welcome Ross Mirkarimi.
You're very kind. You're very, very kind. Thank you, David Elliott Lewis, for extending the invitation to me, and thank you to the Central City Democrats. I did not know I was a keynote until I walked in through the door. Nobody told me that, but I was asked to come to certainly share the greetings on the occasion of the 7th anniversary of the Central City Democrats, and I said I'd be more than happy to. And for that reason I'm here is because I've always appreciated just that level, I think, of integrity and independence that this Democratic Club has always exhibited. And that while it might be popular to do what more mainstream, well-resourced neighborhood Democratic clubs actually do, that may not always be, I think, the driver of how people in this club rise at their decisions, and sometimes risky decisions, or decisions that are not always about popularity, but about integrity and about principle. I've noticed that over the years. That's never been lost on me, and I know people in my posse, so I wanted to come here just out of respect and solidarity to say congratulations on your 7th anniversary. You share the same birthday week as my son Theo, who turned 4 this past week. And me and our family, my wife Ileana and Theo, we're happy. Things are, it's just such a different year as everybody had lived through the chaos of last year. And I really want to underscore my great appreciation on behalf of me and my family to everybody who lent a hand, who gestured their support, who called out just out of concern or care. There were probably times that I started to just tear up, and in times when I think about it, there's cause to do just that. But really, we pulled through together, and I have been just so chomping in the bit and really eager to get the work done of what it means to be sheriff, and we are. And I started a newsletter because, as David was saying, a lot of people don't even know what the Sheriff's Department does in San Francisco. When you have the only city and county in the state of California, you have a police department, which, by the way, is the most well-funded police department per capita in the United States in San Francisco. That's not true of the Sheriff's Department. And the distinction is that people assume, because the police are responders, first responders, on public safety matters of law enforcement that weren't just about corrections or about incarceration. And while that's a central part, which my predecessor had made famous, Mike Hennessy, it is only a pillar of the many things that the Sheriff's Department does. Because we're about saving lives. And I think that that matters to this club and the constituency of this club. It's about the very fact that there are a number of pockets in San Francisco who are disadvantaged, underserved, and have been neglected. I knew this before I was a supervisor, but as a supervisor representing the Fillmore and the Western Addition, we absolutely kept that central to our ethos, that any time that we would write policy or try to galvanize response, we would do so knowing that there is a disproportionate economy in San Francisco and that there's classism. And that plays itself into the criminal justice system. It does. When I ran for sheriff and came in as sheriff, when I see that nearly 56% of those that are incarcerated come from the African American community, which is not unfamiliar in many urban circles in this state or this country, but yet I won't let go of the very fact that San Francisco is seeing the fastest exodus of its black population than any other major city in the United States. I feel obligated to paint that nexus for San Francisco that rests on its laurels, as people like to associate us as being very enlightened and very progressive, and we are. But there's some areas we have fallen off. And I could see that even in public safety or the criminal justice system. And I want to be the sheriff that reminds people that, like what my predecessor had instituted, sending message to the state and across the country, that it's important to innovate so that we are rehabilitating, so that we recognize what the power of redemption looks like, even in an industry like the criminal justice industry that is not welcoming of these kind of philosophies. And that's why San Francisco was cutting edge, and I think will continue to be cutting edge in this arena. And why I want to bring to the attention of people that I much rather, unless we have to incarcerate somebody, that I much rather use the power of sheriff or the power of legislation to divert from incarceration. Just so you know, we have the lowest jail population in the state of California for a county our size. The lowest jail population. We are record low. Now, I'm not saying that so that you generate applause for the sake of that number, but I want you to understand the importance of it. It's because for the first time, there's a symmetry formulating between district attorney's office, believe it or not, public defender, adult probation, sheriff's department, even juvenile probation, city hall, community groups, that whatever the motivation is, that in the chain of order, of cost, incarceration is the most expensive. If that's your driver, recognize that. But if the driver is about saving lives, divert. Use pre-diversion. Use something that gets people into behavioral court, into drug court, into programs that are held accountable. Don't incarcerate, and help folks follow through so that they are able to re-enter in a way that we can all hope for, and not having to squander taxpayer dollars. And we're successful. We're getting more successful with that. And as sheriff, I'm proud to carry forward that agenda that really had been so well established by our predecessor. But I see concerns on the horizon that I do not want to paint this picture that everything is as progressive or forward-thinking as it should. Despite a record low population, I mean record low, we're 800 below our capacity. Just 3 years ago, it was significantly different. We were almost at capacity. So when that occurs, many people might feel like that's a good thing. But when I see that the population is beginning to substitute itself for a spike in a continually escalating population of people who are mentally ill, and when I see the jail system now convert from not just a jail system, but could double potentially as an asylum for those who require mental health treatment, then that also obligates me as sheriff to stand up and say, as a city and a county who's sensitive to these subjects, we must all call attention of all hands on deck, the Department of Public Health, with the mayor and the board of supervisors, with Human Services Agency, and all the CBOs that we certainly outsource to and contract out to help with a population where you cannot expect the jail system to triage something that is requiring such 24/7 kind of attention. It's just lulling ourselves into a false sense of security. And when you couple that with high-profile debates in California or in the United States about gun control or about people who are just not being attended to, then I feel that much more of a role to stand out and say, listen, we need to take care of our people. It's the sheriff's department, to be able, to stand up and say, this is how well we can try to rehabilitate. This is what we need to try to rehabilitate. We need help over here. And not always act in the machismo way that I think that a sheriff would be expected to act and not recognize where there are cracks in the dam. And I have a perfect example of this. Just recently, I was at a meeting of all state sheriffs, of all the county sheriffs in the state of California. And it was a real test for me, too, because when they were debating the bills in Sacramento and in Washington, whether it was on immigration or whether it's on gun control or whether it's on realignment, I found myself being outvoted 57-1. But they were very concerned about me being the only one. They came up to me, are you okay? Do you understand? I go, I do understand. And I want you to know that I want, to just make a statement, but at least explain my statement. And it wasn't, it was an okay tension, but it was an important opportunity for us to be able to express our viewpoints, no matter what the issue may be. And I believe that they were actually very respectful of that. But I didn't feel uncomfortable, maybe a little, but I didn't feel uncomfortable in, articulating, I think, that viewpoint, because the state of California is the largest landmass on planet Earth that incarcerates more people than any other landmass per our population, per the populace of our size. With the exception of maybe China or Russia, we don't really know the true numbers. But if you think about California and how many we do incarcerate, this is why that when we talk about democratic institutions and when we talk about an independent or progressive perspective, that cannot be detached from the criminal justice or public safety system. And San Francisco really is, I think, helping drive, new perspectives and new consideration. On realignment, you probably only get headline news on what realignment is. I'm not the only sheriff, but I'm in a minority, small minority, who believes in realignment. I actually think that we'll do a better job on the county level of welcoming back prisoners from the state and putting them through a more effective reentry system, depending on what got them incarcerated in the first place or in their history, and treating them in a very tailored and specialized way. I actually am more confident that we'll be able to do something about it and demonstrate to the rest of California and the country that this may be the right way to finally take what has always been incarcerate first and rehabilitate third in a system in a country that doesn't necessarily understand that quite yet, even in a democratic administration. And so I'm just very motivated and propelled by, I think, all the possibilities that we can deliver on this stuff. And then when I look more locally at the threat and the unfraying of City College, for example, right? I mean, this is an institution that I know, like so many people here, like Bruce